The government has been accused of making things worse between New Zealand and the Cook Islands by withholding more money. A second round of funding to the realm nation has been paused, totalling almost $30 million over 2 years. It comes after the Cook Islands signed partnership agreements with China earlier this year without first consulting New Zealand. Foreign Minister Winston says the Cook Islands has breached New Zealand's trust. Teuila Fuatai has more.
The details of the additional funding suspension are laid out in a letter from Winston to Cook's Prime Minister Mark Brown. It's an extra $11 million on top of the $18 million announced earlier this year. Geopolitical analyst Geoffrey Miller is clear on what the cut represents.
When New Zealand uses this language of about a pause on funding, it's a suspension, in other words, of funding, and it's a punishment that the Cook Islands government is facing.
The disagreement stems from 4 partnership agreements Mark Brown signed with China at the beginning of the year. The New Zealand government believes it should have been consulted over the agreements, while Mr Brown disagrees. Geoffrey Miller believes Foreign Minister Winston approach has made things worse.
Winston only solution, it seems, is to escalate further, and that's when I think the Prime Minister needs to come in. I mean, look, the Prime Minister is deeply involved in foreign affairs matters. He is really just as responsible for foreign affairs matters as the Foreign Affairs Minister.
Geoffrey Miller reckons it's clear Mark Brown and Winston do not get on. But Christopher Luxon says the Cook Islands government is at fault and there's no need for him to step in.
We've seen, agreements signed with other countries that we actually want to make sure that there is mitigation plans in place dealing with some of the risks that we see as a government as it pertains to security and defence.
He wouldn't give further details of the plans he wanted to see, but says New Zealand's funding will remain paused until the impasse is repaired.
The Cook Islands has certain rights under the free association model, but they also have responsibilities to engage with us on those issues. As we've seen from the beginning of the year, that hasn't been the case, and it certainly hasn't been to the standard that we need it to be at as well.
Sione Teki, who's a Pacific policy expert, says the broader geopolitical context is important. He believes both Mr Luxon and Mr Peters will be aware of how New Zealand's response is being perceived by its Five Eyes partners.
There's another issue about New Zealand not wanting its alliance partners to think that it's not holding up its end of the bargain, particularly around this geostrategic competition. That's very important because understanding that, you can assess why New Zealand is taking quite a hard line.
He thinks New Zealand is trying to leverage the Cook Islands public to put pressure on Prime Minister Brown and his leadership.
New Zealand is probably thinking, if we play this out, the public is not going to support the political leadership on this issue once they start putting aid on the table and once other things that Cook Island citizens enjoy from New Zealand.
For now, the Cook Islands and New Zealand governments remain, as Geoffrey Miller describes, at loggerheads, with those in both nations watching closely for progress.
Teuila Fuatai with that report there.